Okay.
Anyway, welcome ladies. This is an interview of Trudy, McNeil, Hufham, Young, and Libby, Walton, Merritt for the Southport Historical Society on November 22nd, 2019. The interview is taking place in the Old Brunswick County Jail Museum. And the videographer is Bob Surridge, and I am Nancy Christensen. So we're going to skip the first one. Since we're meeting here in the old jail, Trudy, do you remember any people who worked here?
Well, the only person I actually remember when I was in high school, Mr. Radcliffe, was the jailer. But I don't even remember what his first name was. He lived down there on the corner from the post office now. But it was across from the school on the corner. I think there's a bed and breakfast there now, Southport Inn or something like that. His granddaughter lives down in the county. But that's it. I remember reading and heard that Joy Gregory was one of the first women that was a jailer here. But as far as the rest of them, I know that Mr. Russ that lived across the street, he was a jailer before, but I must have been an awful little child or before my time. His grandson, Pee-wee Russ, Jimmy Russ, still lives here, and he remembers it very well. But I cannot recall any of the jailers other than Mr. Radcliffe.
Okay. Libby, what about you? Do you know anyone who worked here? Do you
cannot remember the name of the gentleman that I had the most interaction with. I kind of think he was the weekend jailer, because when I would come with my father here, it would be usually on the weekend to see one of his clients that was upstairs.
Okay.
So
And what time frame was it when your dad?
The 60s.
In the 60s when your dad was an attorney.
Right.
And he represented some of the prisoners.
Yes, upstairs.
And he would bring you here?
He would bring me here. My mother was an invalid basically, and so when my father would have me, time with me on the weekends, we would often have to incorporate some of his legal work with whatever the activity was we were going to do. So we would swing by here, he would see clients, and then we would go wherever out to the farm where he was from, in the lower part of the county, or whatever activity we were doing. But he would bring me here. I remember the first time he sat me with the jailer, whoever this man was. I can picture him, but I don't know his name. And they sat me under those steps over there to sit while my dad went upstairs where the prisoners were. And I sat there, and I was a little bit afraid of the jailer. And he was eating an apple at the same time he was dipping snuff. And he took a bite of the apple and asked me if I wanted a bite. And at that time, I took off up those steps to find my father, who was upstairs in this room on the back, on the left. And after that, he always let me go up the steps with him. So,
And how old were you then?
I would say I was somewhere probably between 6 and 10.
Okay. Do you remember the layout of the
Yes.
rooms here? Can you
I do.
explain that?
I remember that she would come through, and there was a desk where the jailer, the weekend jailer, sat right there, and a chair very much like this that sat beside it,
Okay.
looking this way. And that's where I would sit, and he sat there. Now, I remember these rooms, but I don't remember exactly what was in each room. I recall there was a desk at a high counter like that you'd see like in a bank or something at one time when this was the sheriff's department, if you remember that. And I think in this back room here, and I can definitely remember what the cells looked like upstairs.
Upstairs.
Yes.
Okay. Were there prisoners in any of the other rooms?
Okay, I don't know that I can actually picture this, but it was my understanding that if they had, like, there were white prisoners on one side, and I remember there was as many as maybe 4 or 5 men in this one cell. I think Bob called it one time cages, because that's what they looked like upstairs. And I remember that was, horrifying to me when I went upstairs to see it. Because the jails that I had seen were the ones on Westerns with the round black bars, and these were not. And they had painted them at that time. There was some kind of silver metallic paint that was, I'd heard it was leftover paint from something else that they had painted in the town. And they just needed to paint those old cages, those colors. But it didn't make it any less. I mean, it seriously was disturbing, because it did look like a cage and not an old-timey Western jail.
Yeah.
Wow. So you said they separated the races?
I believe so. They did, but I can't recall. Seemed like there was a room upstairs, and I haven't been upstairs since the 60s. And it seemed like there was a time that my father went into some room or something on the back right, and I don't know, because he represented all groups of people.
Sure.
And I know at one point they had arrested a man who was from Cuba, I believe, or somewhere, on one of the ships that was coming into Sunny Point. And he was on the rotation for, ones that needed representation, but didn't have the money. And so I remember he came here to see that guy, and he was in that room, that he saw him.
Well, it seems very probable, because all those rooms do have the bars on them, and they were used for cells as well as the bullpen.
Yes, they couldn't understand each other at all. He couldn't understand them, and there was no, Spanish translation back then still. And I remember that. I guess that's why I remember, because it was so. I could hear my dad. People talk louder when they're trying to get someone to understand them. But generally, it was right up here, and there would be anywhere from 1 to, I think I've seen as many as 4 men in the cages.
There are 4 bunks. There were 4 bunks that society took down 2 in each one of those cells, so now there's just 2 in each one. So do either one of you remember hearing about breakouts from this jail?
Well, I've heard of them, yes, by someone else writing about them. But I mean, personally, no. I remember that they had, what did they call them when they could leave for a while and come back? I can't remember.
Work release?
I don't know. Well, this young man, he just roamed all over town. And I remember, you remember?
He came to my house one time, looking for my dad. They let him out.
James Bernard. And James would, Catherine, my daughter Catherine, and maybe Libby was with him, and Joan Bomer and some of them went down to play ball at the ball field. And he came down there to help them, or play with them or something. And I remember we were at the grocery store, which was down on the other end, on House Street. And my two little girls said, "Look, Mom, this nice man that came and played baseball with us." And I about passed out. They never got to go to Taylor Field again to play baseball. I said, "I don't think that you're going to play baseball with James Bernard anymore." But he was obviously not violent or anything. He was just, I don't know what he was in jail for, beating up his mother or something. But anyway, he used to ride a horse into town, and the poor horse was, I don't think it ever got a drop of water or anything, and he lived way out on 211 somewhere, and he'd ride that poor horse into town. But he wasn't someone that I wanted my little girls to play baseball with, so we didn't ever play anymore.
But apparently it was a very relaxed kind of system because he would come out or he would demand to see his attorney and they would let him out because we lived 2 blocks on Bay Street, going that way.
Okay.
And he would show up at our door and want to see my dad. And so
He was something
it
else.
was a wild, I mean, it just seems wild that they would let anybody out.
So did your father actually represent him then?
I don't know. I can remember when my father was a judge, at one point, he was like forbidden to come in the city limits anymore because it just caused so much trouble when he was here. And I do remember that, I don't know if that was a joke or whatever, but that he sent James away, that he wasn't allowed to come back in the city limits. Cause
Yeah, he did cause some problems, but I won't go into that.
No. Okay. Do you have any other stories of law enforcement in the town other than the jail?
Well, I remember at one time the city police office was down where the old fire station was. And
Okay.
And of course, that's been torn down. It was just a little building where they parked the fire truck underneath and had a little apartment upstairs where one of the men that was on the fire department lived with his family. And I think it was one big room and a kitchen and a bathroom. So it was not plush accommodations. And I remember Otto Hickman was policeman.
Mhm.
Jack Hickman was policeman. Herman Strong was policeman. George McCracken was policeman, chief of police. And when I was a little child, we lived on the corner across from the Baptist church. And my grandfather, we lived with my grandparents. And if we would get to being too rowdy around the house, there was a man named Melvin somebody that was a policeman, and my grandfather would pick up the phone and say, "I'm calling Melvin right this minute." And it didn't faze me a bit. I didn't know that man wasn't going to come over to the house after me, but that's the first one I remember was somebody named Melvin. And then Otto Hickman and Jack Hickman, they were brothers. And
No major crimes or anything that you can remember?
well, not this one, I don't think you'd call this a major, but at one time we had somebody that broke in houses, and I remember waking up when I was 11 years old, and my mother and father were talking in the hall, and I thought, and we'd just gotten a new puppy, and I thought something had happened to the puppy, and I said, "I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it. If something's the matter with Bucky." And Mom came in and said, "Trudy, for goodness sake, be quiet. There was a man in here at the foot of your bed." And he broke in a lot of houses around town. And he was able to get up our back steps. And there was a porch out back. And then I guess the doors were not locked. And the dog was asleep right down there. He obviously didn't pay attention to who it was. And I think Otto Hickman was policeman at the time. And he went out the front door. And we had a big vine that grew up to the roof almost. And it had made the banister rails real dusty. And all 10 fingerprints were left on that banister rail by the side, but I don't think they knew what fingerprinting was at the time, because they obviously, but they finally said who it was, and his grandfather stopped him or something anyway. He was a young boy that lived around town. But that's about the scariest thing I can think of.
I guess so.
Mama was petrified to go upstairs at night in that huge house in the dark. And we were scared she didn't want to go, never go to that, but anyway, we all slept together for a while. Getting each other's going by.
If I were you, I'd be afraid to go upstairs.
Trudy, do you remember, and I think it was Chief Clark,
Oh yes, I forgot about,
having a little zoo?
yes. Yeah.
Do you remember?
Sort of, not, I don't
It
remember
was
too
in
much about the
Franklin
zoo.
Square
Yeah,
Park,
yeah,
right?
he had things behind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ain't forgotten all about him, the Clark man. I remember you said he had a little zoo. I remember his daughter had a little raccoon that she carried around on a leash. I saw her not long ago. But that's about as much as I remember about it. The Clark man and his wife, and they lived upstairs over there. I'm not sure. I better not say that because I'm not sure where they lived. But that we didn't get a new fire truck for so long that they were able to keep the one that's in the
Yes.
on display
On
out
display.
there
Uh-huh.
for years and years and years. And we didn't have a siren until the Second World War. It was just a bell. And the Defense Department put a siren on the top of where the bell was. And so they gave it to us after the war. We got to keep it.
I got it. I love it.
Because they would ring that siren when the enemy boats were too close to Southport, which they came several times.
Libby, do you remember anything, without compromising your father's position, do you remember anything about law enforcement in Southport?
The only thing that I remember is that this was kind of like a hot spot. There was always some men standing out front smoking.
Yeah.
When you came by, there was always someone hanging out there.
Was the fence around that?
The fence was not there, and then I remember after the fence, seeing it.
Okay.
Yeah, the high fence after a while.
Yeah, it wasn't there though when I was really little, was it, Miss Trudy?
I don't think so.
Like the early 60s, I don't believe there was a fence around it. And the only crime that I remember that was shocking to me, and it was because didn't happen in Southport, but anyone who was arrested in Brunswick County was brought here.
Right.
And so at one point they had called my dad to represent this man who had killed his 5 children.
Oh my Lord, no, I've forgotten that.
But anyway, so I remember that my dad came up here. We were supposed to go somewhere. He didn't let me come that time.
Yeah.
And he came up here and spoke to the man. And I remember that I don't know, I was too little really to understand it. But I remember him talking about, he just didn't know if he could do that one. He just didn't know that one was just the worst, case that he ever had to represent.
60s?
Mm-hmm. Yes, in the 60s.
Well, it must be in that book.
We've got some of those.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. That was all very, very interesting. What was it like to go to school here? And where were the schools you went to?
Well, there was only one school when I went to school. 12 grades in one building.
And that was what is referred to as the high school?
Yes.
Okay.
Started first grade there
Mm-hmm.
and graduated in '54. So, and it was nice. We were not, it was just a nice community and a nice place to go to school. It was great. And when Libby and Catherine were little, they started there also. And I think by that time they had added some wooden houses in the next block area, right by it.
They had built that annex,
Yeah.
that brick
Oh, yeah.
on it. And then sometime, I think when we were in the second, I don't know, it was after the first grade, they brought those
Those
wooden,
there's 3 of those, I think.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
So where were they in relation to the present day post office where the school once was? Those
They were over,
structures.
well, the courthouse, of course, was
Yes.
there, and there was sort of a clear lot that the school took up from where the post office is all the way to the sidewalk area. And that's where the 3 wooden buildings were put. After they put an annex over to the side of the building. They put a small other annex on the other side when I was in school. And they had to build the library and the cafeteria on the back, if you were facing the school, the library and the cafeteria were on the left side, the library upstairs and the cafeteria down. When they first started with the cafeteria, when I was in the 4th and 5th grade, everybody just brought their lunches or ran home at lunch. And they started the cafeteria then, but it was upstairs in a small room that had been the home economics room. And I thought it was wonderful. I wouldn't have washed the dish at that time at home for anything in the world, but they told us that if we volunteered to wash dishes, we could get free lunch. So I decided I wanted some of that lunch instead of running home and having the lunch that our cook had cooked and put on the dining room table. It just sounded so much fun to me to go upstairs. And I remember Mom found out that I had decided to wash dishes for my lunch.
What was her reaction?
She thought she said, Trudy, I can't believe. It wasn't long after that I started having to wash all the Sunday dishes after Sunday dinner. But that didn't last too long because those huge hot tubs, I didn't particularly like it. The lunch wasn't that good all the time anyway. Sometimes it was just a thing of beans and a piece of raw onion and a roll. That was it. I wasn't too fond of that. Sometimes I'd eat in the lunchroom and I just lived a block away, so I'd run real fast and see what everybody had for dinner that day, and I'd eat some more and go back.
So how long was your lunchtime then, an hour?
We must have gotten near an hour, at least 45 minutes.
What about you, Libby? What do you remember about school?
I remember, walking in the first day and seeing over the principal's door a big paddle, a big thick wooden paddle with the holes drilled in it. And I said, why does it have holes in it? And someone said, that's to let the steam out. And I remember horrified. I was absolutely horrified that anything I did would be wrong and I would be taken in the principal's office.
You were so shy, you were
I know, I was
passed
scared
out.
to death.
Well, I have a lot of friends that in my class that that paddle got used on, I can tell you, when I was in school.
And then was there smoke?
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't down there. I don't know. I know that they had to go line up because we had some rowdy boys in our class.
So do you remember any particular teachers?
Yes, I remember Harry Sanders. He was our principal and our basketball coach and football coach and everything. And our favorite teacher in high school was Miss Alline Williams. And I remember all of them, but I'm going to some of them I didn't like. So when I was a small child, there was Mr. Lingle was principal, and his wife taught school, Miss Minette Lingle. And she always put on the children's plays. They had plays during in the afternoon that always have something in the auditorium for us. And early
Every day?
Not every day, but every day in the mornings, we all marched in to Miss Willis. Miss Ron, her husband was the druggist chief. And she taught the 2nd grade, and she played the piano very pretty. And she would play for all of us to march in, very quiet. And we'd have assembly in the morning. They'd read a verse out of the Bible, and we might sing something. Then we left and went back to class. But I marched many a mile to Miss Willis playing the piano for us to march.
Nancy?
So, Libby, do you have any memories of going to school here?
Well, yes, lots of little kid memories that, I guess the biggest memory is when the school burned down. And that was, kids wouldn't do it today, but I remember we were crying because that was where you grew up. You went to school from 1st grade through high school, and that's where we thought we would be. And even though, none of us said we wanted to go to school, I remember a lot of us were surprised at how upset we were when it burned. And then, of course, after that, we were scattered all over town in every church, Sunday school class that anybody had available.
Over Castle Beach.
It's just everywhere.
So where were you sent?
I was sent over to what is Franklin Gallery now. That was the city hall. And
Yes.
they had 2 rooms that were upstairs that used to be the public library, but they were empty at that point. And so my classroom for 7th and 8th grade was above the city hall. And we were the only classroom up there. They made what books they salvaged from the library. They had a small school library in that other room that's upstairs.
So was Catherine there also?
I think
That was the
Catherine-
first year we got split up.
Yeah,
7th
but,
grade.
yeah, because Catherine went to the middle school over at, what's the, Brunswick.
On Lord's Drain, what
Yes,
was
and
the
she went over
drain
there,
school?
because Marion Byrne was over there, he was her teacher, Colonel Byrne. But that's where she went, and Marie had to go catch a bus and go all the way to Castle. The children went to school over there in those big houses, and cold. It was terrible in the winter because they were not insulated at all, and the wind would blow across. Marie would have so many clothes on her when I put her on the bus, she couldn't hardly walk. She was, and I remember they had a man over there, Mr. Lanier.
Yes, it was.
He was the
teacher.
Yeah, he was the principal over there. They had to have one over that way as well as here, trying to keep up with the children. And Marie would come home and I'd say, well, darling, what did you do today? Well, I went to so-and-so's class, so-and-so's class. That was a long way. She had to walk across that cold place. And I went to him and I said, I want to know why Marie has to go to all of these classes. She was like in the 4th or 5th grade. I can't remember, 4th grade. And he said, well, she's smarter than all the rest of the children and she gets through first. So I just send her with all the notes I need to give the teachers what to do. So she was the courier over there in the cold. But I was so glad when she didn't have to go over there anymore. But of course it was nice in the spring. And the fall before it got so cold. It was beautiful over there. I remember going over, I was a grade mother and having Easter egg hunts for me and things over there.
Now, you were talking before about one of the principals who was also a coach. The basketball was one of the
Harry
sports.
Sanders.
Yeah. Did you play basketball?
Played 4 years. I was the center. I don't know how good I was, but I was taller than everybody else, and they'd feed me the ball, and I'd turn around and go flip and throw it in the net. So, and then no matter how hard they jumped, they couldn't. These little short girls couldn't bat it out of my hand. There was me and one other girl a Gainey girl from Leland in the county that was as tall as I was. The rest of them were little short girls.
They were playing basketball.
Yeah, well, they had to. There wasn't that many tall girls around to play at that time. But yeah, I played basketball.
What about you, Libby? Did you do sports or other clubs?
Well, we had Glee Club. That's the only thing I remember that was available to the younger kids because they didn't really have, they were just beginning like sports into what would be junior high and I was in the 7th grade, so we really didn't have any opportunity for team sports at that age. But we did have the Glee Club, and we were fortunate to have 2 African American teachers that came and taught at the school, because at that time integration was achieved in the 60s in Southport by what they called freedom of choice, and there were very few African American children that came over to our school, and a couple of teachers, Mr. Frank and Miss Annie Francis. And they were wonderful. Everyone loved them, and they were so talented. And they whipped our little old Glee Club into this really great choir. I mean, everybody sang in it, boys and girls. It wasn't, I mean, you just did it.
Yeah.
And the choirs were huge, and we would have the performances and in the old auditorium.
Yeah, it burned. We had plays all the time.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you then. Did you graduate high school here?
No, I was the first graduating class at South Brunswick High School. I went to here, and then I went over to Brunswick, what do they call it, Brunswick High
Yeah,
Brunswick Technical School, we call it BCT.
yeah.
Brunswick County Technical School, is for 2 years and then went on out to the high school.
Nice.
But almost everybody in town that's my age, or probably older, and not too much younger, can remember being in one of Miss Lingle's plays.
Yes.
And everybody go, well, what were you? Well, 1 year I was this, and 1 year I was a tulip, and 1 year I was a bluebell, and 1 year...
She had the most wonderful
She
plays.
made everybody, I think she would, I don't know where she got any materials, but you had to make a crepe paper dress.
Oh, yes, I remember.
The parents had to come up and that just had to do it. You didn't have a choice. But, or if your mother couldn't do it, you had to find someone who did it, who would make you a crepe paper dress to be in these little plays year after year.
I remember Mama made mine, she sewed, and when I got it to school, I was a firefly. And I got it to school, she decided my dress fit somebody else better, and she gave my dress to her, and I had to put on the other girl. Oh, Mama was upset, because she had worked on that dress forever. And we were fireflies, and we sang Shine Little Glowworm, Glimmer, Glimmer, and we had flashlights. And we'd dance around a little bit, and then we'd say glimmer, glimmer, and put the flashlight back of us, flick it on and off. And we wore, boys then were wearing those like aviator caps. And I had to borrow my next door neighbor's aviator cap, and that was, put our hair on so we'd look like a bug, you know, it was smooth. Shine little glowworm, glimmer, glimmer.
And everyone participated. I mean, you didn't argue with Ms. Lingle. You did exactly what
So
she said.
what were you?
I know the first year Catherine and I were tulips.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember the next year what. Daffodils maybe. And then the next year was when we had to dance with the boys and you didn't get to choose. And everybody in my age group can say, oh, I had to dance with so-and-so that year. I had to dance with this boy or that boy.
So were you wearing gloves?
No, we had to dance 1 year with scarves. I mean, it was, you held the scarf, the boy held the other one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Turn around.
Yeah.
All that. That was the Valentine's show. But she usually had, what, 2 or 3
every
shows a year, Christmas.
And everybody came.
Oh, yeah, all over town.
Oh, of
Everybody
course.
came and filled the auditorium. The auditoriums were always full.
Well, I guess it's all right to say, we had Little Black Sambo one of the years I was in the 2nd grade. No, I was in the 1st grade. And I had a teacher that was from up north, and I couldn't understand her very good. And we were all playing Monopoly. You know, that had become a big thing. And I was Black Mumbo, I was the mother, whatever. Mama had me all stuffed and a thing around my head. And during intermission, when they were changing the stage, I was supposed to sing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. I always had a big mouth. I didn't need a mic. And I stood on the stage with all this stuff all over me, and I sang Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, coming after me. And I sang, instead of a band of angels, I sang a Pennsylvania coming after me. I had been playing Monopoly, and that was the train. And I thought that Miss Asbury, my teacher, said a Pennsylvania, not a band of angels. So here I was in the 1st grade. Mom said, I threw my head back and it echoed all over the auditorium. A Pennsylvania coming after me, coming for to carry me home. But she had the lions and their costumes, you know, and it was just, she just went to so much trouble for it to be so authentic, with the lions going round and around the tree with the little boy and Little Black Sambo.
Yes.
She really went all out. She should have been
It's different every year.
Yeah.
But
But then, I was in the 1st grade then.
But now, talking about plays, Lou Hardy was younger than you?
No, he finished school with me.
He did. So were you ever in any of the plays that he did at
Yes.
the high school?
I was in a couple of them, several of them.
Which ones were they? Do you remember?
Well, I just threw away a whole bunch of that stuff. I remember he wrote a song for me to sing and one for Eleanor Potter Smith, Sandy Spencer's mother.
Uh-huh.
And I remember dancing at some of them with Dr. Perkins. We were all dressed up like I don't know what, but anyway, but Lou wrote me a song, especially for me, something about stay with me, stay with me. It was supposed to be a love thing.
Uh-huh.
And they put me with, remember Moe Clement? And he was so much shorter than I was. I had to sit down to sing to him. And I belted out that song, but I had children then, so I had 2 children. I remember one of them, Catherine Marie, once stayed in the aisle watching me sing that song. Lou did very well. And of course, Lila Piggott was the instigator. She's the one that got all the plays together, and she had wonderful plays. I've got a lot of pictures at home. In fact, Lou sent me copies. Lou Hardy sent me copies when he was doing a book. He came and got a lot of mine, and then he sent me copies of what I didn't have. And
I hope you're not throwing this stuff away.
I know the pictures I have. They're
We
still
need
in my
to
desk.
keep some of this stuff.
But he wrote the song Columbus, and Cindy Sellers directed. Have you ever heard Cindy sing? You've missed a lot if you haven't ever heard Cindy sing.
Really?
She directed C notes for years and years, and she directed that Columbus, and they didn't mention that in his obituary, and that's one of the main ones. It was so great. We even performed it on Stay in Stage in Wilmington.
Did you?
You need to ask Cindy about all these things.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have
She
to
knows all about that.
to make a note of that. Wow, wow. So now, this story I already know. Talk about Agnes Dolby.
You went to kindergarten, didn't you? Ms. Russ?
Yes. That's it.
She had a little, in her back bedroom, she'd have about 6 of you. It wasn't over 6 or 7 of you, was it?
It may have been a few more than that.
Yeah.
But it would be, you started when you were 4.
Yeah.
You stayed there for
2
4 or
years.
5.
Yeah,
Because they didn't have kindergarten.
Right.
Oh,
And she was very good. She taught those children a lot of things. My children were advanced when they started 1st grade because they'd stayed there 2 years, and what they didn't learn the 1st year, they picked up better the 2nd year. And she was really great. I remember June Skipper and Catherine and you, I guess, and Dickie, June's brother. And it was great. And I also remember that my husband was on the fire department, so I was very conscious of where things ought to be for fires. And I took Catherine down there and left her that day. And that night I had a nightmare of the house caught on fire. She couldn't get out of that back bedroom because it was like a bathroom and 2 rooms on each side. And I thought, I can't take her back anymore, but I did because she enjoyed it so much. But I just had a horror of that little room catching on fire back there. But she was really good. She was strict with them, and she taught them to be responsible. If you had something that she sent home, you had to bring it back. That taught them that they had to be responsible for things that they had. And I remember if you lost the little index card with your grades on it and an envelope, you had to pay her 50 cents. I remember that.
If you lost them on purpose, especially, right?
Yeah. But she was a very good teacher. She married again, and her name was Joby.
that's false.
Yeah. And it was her father-in-law that was one of the jailers. Of course, he was dead at that time.
Well, that's the only reason I know that story is that when Trudy was volunteering here as a docent, we had been given a nightstick that had belonged to her father-in-law, but it had Agnes Doby written on it. And I was asking people around, do you know who Agnes Doby probably was. Well, I should have known first off to ask Trudy.
Really?
But she happened to be here that day, and she says, well, I do.
I
So,
went when they had the house tour,
yes.
several years ago, and that house was on the tour. I was volunteering over here, and I left, and when I wanted to see what that room looked like, that all of y'all had gone in the garden.
I'm sure it is much smaller than I remember. This room is so much smaller than I remember it.
Yeah, it wasn't a very big room at all, but she had the nicest little tables and chairs.
Seemed huge.
Oh, yeah, she
Is
had
that
fixed
right?
up very nice, and when they
Wow.
had a little graduation, when Eric graduated, and I'm pretty sure, I don't remember Catherine and Marie, but when Eric graduated, she had fixed, I'm sure Marie too, come think of it, she had in her bay window, which they'd torn off of her house now, it was a pretty little bay window, and she put risers in there so they could all stand in her dining room. She had that in her dining room. It was very nice. She utilized every spot in that house for those children.
She must have, because it does not appear to be a very
No,
large
but
house.
she did a very,
That is great. That
it
is
was
great.
very good, and she wasn't she may have had a high school education, but she was a smart businesswoman, because when I was in school, she had a candy store. This right over here now is a bed and breakfast.
Oh, that's where the candy store was?
Yeah, it was over by the school, and then she bought it and moved it, or it was given to her when they started to add those other rooms filled over there. And she sold paper and pencils and candy and all kinds of things, and she and her 3 children lived in the back of that store. She had separated at that time. That was before she married Mr. Russ. She was a Peterson then. And she was a very good businesswoman. She did very well. They moved the house that's behind that bed and breakfast, so there was a Methodist parsonage. And she moved that over there and had that fixed up to make money too. But that was after she married Mr. Russ. Vernon had never been married, and he married her. We had his family home.
Okay, now this is really switching gears. Did any of you ever go to the dance halls in Southport or in the county?
Yes.
So tell us where it was and,
Well, I don't know where it was when y'all were growing up, but when I was growing up, it was before Hazel washed it away. There was a pavilion on Oak Island, on Long Beach, and had square dances in the summer every Saturday night. And somebody called the square dances, and if I always I thought I had to be there every Saturday night, and I was too young to be going to begin with, but there was a grown girl down at the other end of the street, and sometime her mother wouldn't let her go, or she had somebody to go with her, so she'd take me, we'd take the bus. They had a WGNS bus line went from Southport over to the beach.
really?
And so we'd catch the bus and go to the dance, and of course, men would ask anybody to dance, the square dances, because it was just around.
Yeah.
And it was so, Frankie Cox, who's still living, he and his brothers, Frankie played the fiddle and his brothers played the guitar. And there was, I can't remember exactly who else, but I remember his twin brothers playing. They were very good, and they had a man that called the square dance. It was fun. It was every Saturday night, and I don't remember a lot of drinking and cutting up. I just remember a good time. Everybody, it was a wonderful building. It had a restaurant on one end that later on they fixed up and called, and Blanche Watkins lived in that for a little while when he built a house, because he owned it for a while.
So where, on Long Beach Road, what is currently Long Beach Road, is that where it was?
No, it was on the water. There was nothing.
Okay.
When I was growing up, there was not anything on that road till you got to the curve where it used to be red and white grocery store, but I don't know can't remember what's there now. Something's there on that corner and you went around the curve to the beach. There was just one road. And it was all woods. It was not developed at all. What we used to call Tranquil Harbor. That was not developed at all. It was just a dirt road that went down where the Thompsons, Thomas Van Thompsons and family owned all that land down in there. And when my grandfather was, after the Depression came, he went down there and they had like a turpentine business down in there. He helped down in there till he could get, he became registered deeds or something after that. But after he lost his factory, but during the Depression. But there was just the one road that went down all the way to, it didn't go all the way to Cable's Castle when I was in high school. It was after that they extended the road down all the way to the beach, because the Cables built that house up on the big hill. And the
where was that, Cable's Castle?
It's still there. It's a big house, almost before you get to the end, the very end of the beach. I think there's a road to the right after you pass it that goes down to a restaurant and like a little marina, something down there. But when Hazel came, it cut an inlet through there, and that had to be filled in because the end of Long Beach was cut off. But later on they filled it in, and so a lot of those houses are built on made land.
Nancy, do you know that the stretch of on the western end of the island, there's a long stretch where there's nothing on the beach side. Hell's Cottage is across from.
Yeah, they own that land across from
Is it the one that's up on
Yeah, it sits up and all you can see is the flag and
the
the.
roof. And they own that land in front of them, so people can't build in front of them.
Yes. Tell me about them. Did they own a business in the area?
No, they're from upstate, Sanford maybe. Seemed like someone said his father's in the carpet business. I don't know. I really don't. I just remember that we were, all of us thought they were so handsome. The Cable boys would ride their Jeep down to the pavilion, and a lot of times they'd bring their girls with them, you know, from upstate. They didn't pay any more attention to us if we had been chairs in the corner, but we thought that they were absolutely wonderful dancing, and they were so good looking, and they were rich and everything else. They have since bought houses on Oak Island, on Ballhead Island. But they still own that because of that house up there, the family does.
It's my understanding that road company is still in existence.
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Did you go to the movies at the museum?
Every weekend, I think.
when I was little, it changed 3 times a week. And I went to all 3 of them. I don't care which, because I only lived half a block away.
Yeah, but how much did it cost you to go to the movies?
A dime.
A dime.
And I remember I was always taller than everybody else. And I remember having to argue with Mary Johnson that I wasn't old enough to pay a quarter. And when she said, well, you look like you are, I said, well, I'm not. But I was taller than some of the grown people paying the quarter. But and you all went to here in Capitol.
I saw my first movie there. It was black and white. It was
You
only black and
remember what
white.
it was?
Yes, I do.
What
It was
was
a
it?
movie called Dondi. It was about a little, I think it was a little orphan boy, but it was in black and white.
Yeah.
That was the only black and white movie.
So have you been in it more recent years?
Yes, and well, to see some of the performances that they had there. Yeah.
So how different is it nowadays?
Well, it seems different because, again, everything was bigger. When you're smaller. And so it's, someone was asking me, who's not from around here, they wanted to know how many seats were in the Amuse-U, and I was like, oh, there must have been 200, and there's not even close to that. And they used to have 2 aisles.
Yeah, I was going to say they had
2
some.
aisles. And it was segregated, and they were in the balcony. And I remember as a child thinking, daggone, I want to be up in that balcony.
No,
That's
it
where
was
you
the same
can
way.
see.
We wanted to
Those
sit
are
in the
best
balcony so bad.
seats. And, but it was very, that was just the way it was. And there were not, it just seemed like that was just.
No one ever protested. They had the best, they could see better than
That's what-
anybody else.
So we
The
didn't
black
realize
people
the
could
heat
upstairs
rose, it's
and-
very hot up here also.
It must have
They
been
didn't have
terrible.
air
They didn't want a
conditioning.
fan, think
Yes,
about it.
especially in the summer.
I can't believe we went in there with no air conditioning.
Uh-huh.
And they would have, during the summer, they would have matinees, one day a week. For us, and it was like a quarter to go. Because you could go with 50 cents and get popcorn, a drink, and admission for
Yeah.
50 cents.
Well, it seemed like it may have been a nickel when I was little, I can't remember. But anyway, but now, it got up to a quarter or something by the time you and Catherine went. But did you see last night on PBS, the little, it was an art skit about, and Bill and Kathy were interviewed, and it showed of them on the stage, and he told about his father, Mr. Price Purpose. It was that, did you see it last night?
No, I did not see that. I didn't realize it was on PBS. But he's told that many times before. I've heard the
This
story.
was, it was very nice. Did you see it, Mike?
I did, and I put it on the Facebook page too.
You did what?
I put it on the Historical
Oh,
Society's
you did?
Facebook
Oh,
page.
okay. Very
So Nancy
Oh,
can
that's
check it out
good.
there.
I can go look at it.
Well, the way I wouldn't have known about it, but Catherine told me, and I wrote it down and put a note on my cabinet so I'd remember to, when I got home last night. And I also recorded it in case I didn't get home in time.
Good. That is good. Now, I'm sure that Libby would not, maybe she would remember anything about this, but I know you remember playing on the old steam engine that used to be on the PB&S line.
And I remember something when I was small. When I was
Yeah.
very small. It was
Yeah.
in back of your house. The
Right
railroad,
in the front, yeah.
it's right in the back. The railroad track went across the road, and for years that old, I don't remember if it was the engine or one of the cars, but we used to crawl around on that. But I didn't get to a lot because Mom didn't let me roam much when I was small, and it was gone by the time I was in high school.
Oh, okay. So you wouldn't have it.
The only, it went right through my yard. And
Yeah.
so we would constantly find railroad spikes and all kinds of little pieces of metal in the yard. I don't know where, it would just show up, or you dig around, you could pull the whole thing out. But that was nearly all of my life, we pulled stuff out of the dirt
Oh, my
in the front
goodness.
yard.
Oh, my goodness.
And when, I know you read that when it caught on fire, that there was an explosion and a man was standing in his window.
What caught on fire? You mean the station?
Yeah, the depot.
Mm-hmm.
And when the fire caused an explosion and something went all the way across to a man on the other street and killed him
Yes.
in his window. He was looking out the window of the fire. I can't, right this minute his name escapes me, but if I thought long enough it might come back. But I can't remember exactly. I'm sure there's plenty of
What
people around.
started the fire? Nobody knows.
I was about 4 or 5, about 5 years old. I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
You know?
Lou Hardy told me, and I've forgotten at this moment what he told me.
Lou was little too. He was probably living in Louisiana at the time because his father went down there to shrimp during the winters. And he went back and forth to school.
So now Trudy, also, tell about when your dad looked after the old Catholic church.
Well, I've just had some copies made of the dedication in 1941 of all of them standing out front. I wanted to share them with our new priest. When the church was built, Daddy was one of the ones that was on the committee to get a church built here because Father Howard was coming from Whiteville, and he was saying Mass at upstairs in what is now Franklin Square Art Gallery, and in homes, the Shannon home and the Marin homes, and maybe ours too. And so at night, Daddy felt a very closeness to the church because he had been there since day one when they started building. And he always opened the church in the mornings. He had a service station just up a block from us, and so he could go around, and he opened the church every morning for people to go in that wanted to go in and pray. And at night after supper, he would take my brother and I, and we'd go around and we'd kneel at the altar. And I can remember kneeling with the vigil light. It would seem so wonderful in there with just that little light. And we would kneel and say prayers at night. And then he'd lock the church up till he got up the next morning, and he'd go back and open it up. And it had a coal-fired furnace. And he would go around and build the fires on Sunday morning to heat the church for everybody to go to church. So, and when they first built it, he helped plant some of those camellias that Becky Felton has in her yard now, and the azaleas, and we'd go around, my brother and I, and help him water them in the afternoons to keep them alive. So it was just a part of me growing up in my family and Daddy. And I had pictures of every stage of the building. And people haven't made copies of things like they do now.
Yeah.
And I took them and gave them to somebody that was making a scrapbook about the church. And I haven't seen anything of them since, but I do have, I had to look around this morning, pictures of the outside and the inside of the altar and everything. And Becky has them also, because Bert was her husband was very interested in, and I loaned him all those pictures for him to make copies of. But that was just part of my life, was Daddy. And I can remember my sister, he had her playing the organ, and we had a little pump organ, no electricity, so in the summer every key stuck. And Sally would play the organ, and Mrs. Fergus sang. She was Dr. Fergus's wife. She had a beautiful voice. But I finally learned one hymn that by heart was, "Oh Lord, I am not worthy," and Sally would play that and I'd sing. I mean, I was a wonderful choir. But then Mrs. Hayes came and she played. My sister said she went off to Sacred Heart College on the other side of Charlotte to get away from that organ. She said she'd play a note and pull up the keys and play a few more notes and pull up the keys. But it was...
Why did it not have electricity? Southport had electricity.
Yeah, but we had electricity, but there was no air conditioning.
Oh, well.
So, and there was just a little pump organ. You know, we had plenty of electricity, but just no air conditioning. The first air conditioning that was put in that church, I happened to be riding by one night, and there was somebody with a spotlight out back knocking holes in the back of the church, and they put them on each side of the altar when you went in. It looked like somebody put wings on the altar, and that's where the air flew out of. Somebody finally changed that. I don't know whose bright idea that was, but that's the first time there'd been air conditioning, because even when my children were little, there was no air conditioning in there. Finally got it air conditioning.
Are you familiar with the church at all?
Yeah, I went a couple of times to folk mass on Saturday night.
Yeah, but you were...
Yeah, I went to the Methodist church.
You were my father, they were Methodist. Well, my mother was Methodist, but my father was Catholic. But
That's really neat. Now, is it true that you started the volunteer organization at Dosher Hospital?
no, that's not true. Sue Jones started it. And Sue Jones and... What was Miss King's first name? Sue King. They started. I was one of the volunteers, but I did not start it. Sue did, and we were it was through the Red Cross, because we wore gray and white striped uniforms and little caps.
Gray ladies.
Yeah, the gray ladies. I couldn't think of it. The gray ladies, but Sue Jones started it. Randy's mother.
Okay, I gotcha.
She was very
Great.
active in everything. But I volunteered from the time Marie was about 2 until right before I had Eric. And I I remember I sold my uniform to the girl across the street. You know, people don't do those things now. We pass things around from one person to the other. I think I sold it to her for probably $2 or something, but anyway, it was.
Well, you had to pay for it initially,
Yeah,
right?
right, and
Just recuperating.
her husband was one of the, she was Love, her last name was Love, and her husband was the head of the bank at that time.
Her daughter Kathy.
Yeah, and, but it was really a nice thing. Of course, we didn't do a lot.
What did you do?
Well, we went in and we straightened the rooms, and we made sure that there was fresh water and things like that. And if anyone didn't have toothpaste or whatever, or we'd run errands downtown to get it, because there was no little store in the, like they have now. I guess they have it now.
Something
They
good shop.
did, where you can shop, little shop in there. But, and we would run errands downtown and walk around, help carry the food trays and pick them up. And I remember one time, Katie Blake was head nurse then, you know, Charles's wife, and she said, Trudy, do you mind going in there and helping with the babies in the nursery? Oh, I thought it didn't take me long, because I always loved to take care of babies, and I went in there and changed their diapers, and it was that we just did simple things. Well, I really wasn't supposed to be in that nursery. I was not a nurse, but I knew probably more about the babies than the nurses did, right? because I already had 2 babies that I was taking care of, so it wasn't any problem to me to fix them, because the nurses were real busy, I think, that day, and the poor little babies were screaming in the nursery. And I went in and soothed them, and that was the best day I had, I think, when I was a grade lady. But it was really nice.
Trudy, do you remember going to the post office to pick up the family mail?
We had 2 mails a day at that time, morning and afternoon, and that's where everybody met and talked. You'd go to the post office and lean up against the wall where you could see your box, and they'd go around putting them in, and you'd run real quick if you got something and open up your box and get your mail out, and then you could read it while you were waiting to see if you got anything else. And that's just the way, that's where everybody met. And we had 2 boxes, because Daddy had one for his business, and we had a little home box around on the side, and it was just the way to meet people.
Do you remember the postmaster, Mr. Yaskell?
Yes, I do.
Any impressions of him, Divine?
No, I just remember Mr. Yaskell and his wife, and then they moved away when I was small, so I don't really remember. But I noticed in that picture that I had enlarged of our church, he's standing at the top.
Is he really?
Because at that time, anything that went on in any church, everybody went, no matter what denomination you were, you went to that, because everybody in town went to midnight mass when we had midnight mass, and that was the dedication that day. With the bishop from Raleigh was here, and everybody was lined up, and had more people there than ever went, because I don't think we had 10 families, and just a small thing. But yeah, I remember Mr. Yankee.
So you don't think he was a member of the church?
No.
So his wife Louise?
I think they were Methodist.
Methodist.
We had Mr. Yaskell at our church. I thought he was a minister.
That's when he came back.
Okay.
They moved back.
Yeah, he came back in the mid-60s.
Yeah. And, but they were Methodist, I'm pretty sure.
So then you are a member of the Methodist Church, the old church, that they moved over to what is now?
No.
No. This building.
Libby, you don't look that old.
No, it's always been that one. I was like, I didn't even know there was
But
another
that was
church.
before they did the addition onto the current.
Oh,
Right.
Yes, I remember when the parsonage was sitting
And
on
the
that
parsonage
corner.
was next door and everything. Okay. And do you remember any of the pastors who were there as you were growing up? And which ones were they?
Bill Davenport, and then, what was his name, Scott, Reverend Scott, Lancaster, Mr. Lancaster's probably the first one. I can't remember. And then Mr. Davenport came.
Mr. Heyman was there.
Oh, Mr. Heyman, yeah,
I
he
used
was
to go to
retired.
Methodist church
Okay.
because there was no Catholic church here when I was small. And my aunt Esther started taking me to the Episcopal church, to Sunday school. And then they quit having Sunday school there because they didn't have enough children. And so my grandmother took me to the Methodist church because she was Methodist. So I went there to Sunday school till I was about 12. And Mr. Heyman was here. I was about 12, 13. In fact, there's a picture somewhere of me and Stuart Calary, she is now, and all of us, and I was the Virgin Mary. And Billy Sanders was Joseph, and all the shepherds and everything standing around us, and I'm sitting in the middle with a doll in front of me, and I sang Away in a Manger.
And that was at one of the services you did that?
I don't remember, it had to be, it was something that
Yeah.
the women, the Sunday school people put on for the
Right.
congregation.
Right.
I don't remember exactly, but I've seen it in the paper in the last few years, in the way it was with,
So were you ever involved in any of that at the church?
No, not specific, no.
Were you ever part, did they have a youth group?
They did, and I
You were
was
there?
definitely part of that. In
Okay.
fact, when I was a senior in high school, I was the only youth. And so
no.
I became a counselor to the junior MYF because there were more in that.
Uh-huh.
So yes, when the doors were open at that church, my family was there. My dad was there. He used to, when they couldn't make the budget, and he would mow the grass himself. And if he wasn't going to be here, he would find someone to mow the grass.
We had fathers that were hands-on in the church.
Yes, they were definitely
Well, I
hands-on.
think they still have that today.
Yeah, they do.
My husband being one of them.
Yeah, Charles was over
The only thing I have then, and I thank you both so much, this has been wonderful, hasn't it, Bob?
I've got to Edinburgh.
Is you have a ancestry that goes way back in Southport and Brunswick County. Can you touch on some of those people who were kind of movers and shakers from your family, like starting with Charles Gause, the original Charles Gause? There was probably
Now, I guess I was now Catherine ought to be here because she's the one who has got all my sister's genealogy.
Oh,
and she could say,
We'll ask her.
But the first Charles Gause, I cannot, I'm sure we can trace our line somewhere, but the Charles Gause that I remember was my grandfather that I lived with, Charles Iden Gause.
Okay.
But the first, on the Dozier side, there was a Richard Dozier that came to Brunswick County in the late 1700s, and he had 3 sons, and Arthur and James and Charles. And my direct ancestor was James. And he was the one, I don't know if y'all have heard about, that they started to go over to the beach at Caswell or somewhere to go for like a picnic, and there was 14 of them. The minister's daughter and all of them were in the boat, and it capsized in a storm that came up rather quickly. And my great-grandfather survived by holding on to the side of the boat. He was a little boy. He and one of his brothers, little brother, but they said they could remember seeing the baby float away. They had really long clothes, dresses and things, they all wore. And they remembered seeing the baby floating away. And all of them were drowned but those 2 little boys. And there was 14 of them on there. And I came from that Charles that survived. And his son was James Henry Dozier that kept Ballhead Lighthouse for 30 years, Sonny Dozier. And then, of course, he built, after he retired, he built the house that I now live in 1913. And then my grandmother, he was my grandmother's father. And then the Goss, Mr. Charles Goss, Charles Iden Goss, who was active in Southport, he was the descendant of the William Goss that lived down at Goss's Landing. And
Where is that?
near Ocean Isle Beach. This Goss, the Goss vaults are down there. And right lately, there was an article in the, what is the magazine, the Southern Brunswick magazine that comes out
Yes.
3 or 4 times a year. There was an article in there about the Goss vaults. And there also, I learned in that, of course I've been down there with that because a man found it. I don't know who he is. He's a cousin of some sort, but I don't know him. He found out about it and bought the land and refurbished everything down there. And they've got it beautiful. My husband took me down there to see it, and they've got flags flying and gates, fences put up and signs and everything. And then he found, through someone, another Goss family cemetery that's somewhere, I think, around Sunset Beach. I'm not sure, Sunset Harbor or Sunset Beach. Catherine's going to take me down there whenever she gets well. But that first William Goss, I think George Washington spent the night with him. So we go back, Catherine says 9 or 10 generations with the Goss side. And that's who I look like, as Gosses, but I inherited their height and everything. And one of their sons was my great-grandfather, and his name was Ephraim Devon Goss, and he was one of the blockade runners during the Civil War. And another nice thing, I think my sister wrote about it one time for Susie Carson, was when, during the Civil War, my Dozier great-great-grandmother had a son that was 17 that was on Fort Fisher. He was a courier to the whoever was in charge. I can't think of his name right this minute. They would all be embarrassed if my sister would be really embarrassed because I can't remember his name. But anyway, he was my great-grandmother. The great-great-grandmother said she could sit over here and hear the guns, hear all the ships being bombarding Fort Fisher, and she knew her 17-year-old child was over there and all of that. And she never got to see him again because he was captured and taken to Elmira, New York, and died of dysentery in the prison there. His name was Frederick Dozier. And but that's little things that we remember the families talking about.
Yeah.
But every now and then we hear real loud, like a jet's backfiring or something, we can hear that, but it's not that. It's something out in the ocean.
Yes.
And old-timey people always said it sounded like the Seneca guns. Well, the Seneca was the big ship that was bombarding Fort Fisher, and they referred to it as the Seneca guns.
I never knew that.
Oh.
Did you know that?
That-
The Union.
Was
Union ship.
that the ship that was loaded with explosions that they
It was shooting at Fort Fisher.
was shooting, or the whole, there was a ship they loaded with explosives and then floated it right into,
Yeah, cannons were shooting
okay,
whatever at Fort Fisher.
no,
Cannonballs, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it sounded just like the Seneca guns going off. And now, I haven't heard it in the last 6 months or more, but I've heard the Seneca guns many times.
That's what they always called it.
That's what we always called it, but I had no idea that's what it was referenced to.
Mhm.
And, I still hear it once in a long while, fortunately a long while, but
Yeah.
I don't think anybody has really identified what it is, Or if they know what it is, they're
No.
not telling.
No, but it's been a sound that's been going around since my great-great-grandmother was living, and it came down from the great-grandma always saying, oh, it sounds like the Seneca guns. But
Is there anything else, any other topic that you think would be of interest about living here in Southport that you would like to, either one of you would like to talk about?
you talk about something you enjoyed when you were young.
Well, it's just an absolutely wonderful place to grow up. We just, I mean, probably not so much Miss Trudy, but you could just open your doors in the morning and let your children go. And you could, you know, you didn't have to worry about them. And I mean, I remember walking around this town a lot barefooted in the summertime. And you know, knowing where all the sandspur patches were and how to get through them. And you just walked around, and if you did, you know, anything that, you know, you weren't supposed to, somebody would call my dad. Like if I went out on his boat, I wasn't allowed on there without an adult. Miss Eleanor would call my dad and say, "Libby's out on that boat." And here he come from his office to
Were the
get me.
streets, did the streets then have the oyster shells?
No, not when she was little.
Okay.
In fact, there were not many when I was growing up. Just sand, mostly seemed like.
Yeah.
The main streets were paved.
Okay, okay.
But not from side to side. I remember when they cut down the trees where car insurance agency is now, there was a big two-story home on that corner, which has been moved out to those part of town, and people still live in the bottom part of it. And there was two beautiful oaks in front of it, and they decided to cut those oaks down to pave the street from one side to the other, and it was really terrible when they did that. And I remember my grandmother saying some old farmer came to town. He said, "Isn't it beautiful?" He liked the pavement. He didn't like the trees. He thought that black asphalt was wonderful. Of course, we lived right across the street. We didn't think it was wonderful that they cut down the trees. But and then I remember one time there was a tree they cut down out. I'm trying to think what's there now. Some kind of little shop. It'd be a block up from where Cat on a Whisk is, going out the road on the same side. There's a house there, the Westcott house. And there was an enormous oak on that corner. I mean, and the women in town, I was little then, they had a meeting down at Leggett's drugstore to try to keep it from being, I think Lila Pickett went out there and put her arms around it or something.
I was going to say.
But that it was, and like she said, the sandspurs were everywhere. I don't think the only place I see a sandspur anymore, and I haven't lately, was at the end of my street, one block down. There was tons of sandspurs there a few years ago, but I think Mary Ann Fury keeps them cut down now, so there's not even any sandspurs there. People in Southport don't know what sandspurs are.
Gosh.
No.
Just as well, right?
That's exactly right. Have you ever been to the beach and run across the hills and gotten those big brown, reddish brown looking sandspurs in your foot? Oh,
Then you're up on the dunes where you're not supposed to be.
That's right.
That's how you get them.
Almost every yard has sandspurs.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
back.
Oh, boy. So what did you do for fun when you were a kid growing up here?
Well, we rode our bikes everywhere. We rode them on the sidewalks. There was a playground over by the Methodist church in the park. That's where you went when you went out for recess at school. And there were huge swings and slide board
yeah,
and the merry-go-round.
yeah.
Really? Where Franklin Square Park is now, is that what you mean?
No, it's behind the Methodist church, right there behind
The
Franklin
Methodist
Square.
church is
Yes.
sitting, the new part of the Methodist church is on
Okay.
part of it.
Okay.
Where the swings were, I just noticed last week.
Yeah.
And we played there every day at recess, you know, and that was, and all ages, everybody went to recess at the same time. You know, which today that wouldn't happen, one class at a time.
We sometimes, we would go down to the garrison when I was in the 8th grade, I remember Miss Hood marching us down there. In fact, I've got pictures of all of us sitting down there on the library steps, because that's when the library was in that little side where the Historical Society Museum is now. That side is where the library was. And I got pictures of all of us in the 8th grade sitting on the steps and standing down there. But that's where we went, and they had tennis courts at that time down there. We could play tennis if we wanted to. Daddy bought a tennis racket for me and thought I'd become I couldn't even hit the ball, and never learned how to keep score. It was just love something, and it just blew my mind. I'd go down there and hit the ball back and forth with some of them sometime when I was about 7th, 8th grade, but I was no good at that. But Daddy loved any sport, and he thought I should excel in all of them, so he was good. He was very athletic too, so he felt like I should have been, but I wasn't shaped like him.
Well, what did you do then as a child? The kinds of things you enjoy?
We skated a lot on the sidewalks. We used to skate down Presbyterian Hill, we called it, because the Presbyterian Church was across from what used to be the Catholic Church, there between the Crimes of the Heart House and the house that's next door. But the people next door bought that lot where the church was, and they've got a garage there now, I think.
Yes.
But that was a small, nice little church, beautiful little wooden church. And of course it's on a hill, and we love to skate down that and skate all over town, ride our bicycles all over town. Like Libby said, even though there was 20 years difference in our time of growing up, you're not disciplined much because there wasn't much to do, and except play all over town. I never did play in the yacht basin or on the riverfront like the boys did. They all played down on the docks, but I never did. Mama would scoop us up after the cook cooked our midday meal dinner. She'd take us over to our little cottage at the beach to play mostly.
You had a cottage at the beach. Now, where was that?
Well, it was a very small one.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy built it for us, I guess, during the end of the war. It was on the front, on the ocean side.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there used to be a curve there by the grocery store, and I don't know what's there now. And you go around, and it was about, I'd say, 3 blocks, maybe not that far down, but before you got to the pavilion. And we go over there every day after dinner and play, and we'd have supper over there, and Daddy would come over from the service station and eat with us at night and go swimming. I couldn't hardly wait for him to get there so I could go swimming with him. And of course, we'd already been in swimming all afternoon. Wanted to go back when he got there. But it was a nice little cottage. We loved it. It had a big porch all the way down, and one big long room, and then a big dressing room. No inside shower. We had to go out in the backyard. It was built up kind of high, and turn on the spigot and get under there to wash off, but no hot water in the whole place. And I remember it was just rustic.
Mm-hmm.
We had Daddy put a sink in, and instead of attaching the sink to anything, he put a hose from a car down through the floor, and all the dishwater ran under the house. But we did have a septic tank, of course I remember, for the bathroom, except the sink wasn't attached to it, just the toilet. And there was an old man named Ira Evans that drove his old truck up and down the beach and shoveled up shells. I don't believe they have as many shells now as they used to. There would be tons of them, and he could fill the whole back of his truck, and he sold them to everybody for the driveways over there. And it was very rustic, but when Hazel came, it picked up that little house and sat it right over in the woods behind Long Beach. And we had there was chairs and couch and a refrigerator. And a hot plate, we didn't have a stove. But after Hazel, we found I was in 54, so I just finished high school. And we found the refrigerator, and it worked. Daddy took it and put it up in where I live now, my Uncle John's shop, and washed it off with the hose. And we also found a sea chest that had come from one of the pogie boats that my grandfather had, and we kept it over there to put bathing suits and towels and things in. And it had washed out of the house, and when my boyfriend at the time and I got over there, we found it sitting on the top of a pile of lumber. And Mama had said, if y'all go over there, look for my sea chest. I want that worse than anything else. And so he found it. He was so proud that he found it. He put it, somehow wedged it in the trunk of his car so it wouldn't fall out, and brought it home to my mother. And she was so excited. And it stayed at our house till we sold it. I think my brother took it to Charleston. No telling where it is now. But that was a big, heavy sea chest.
So your dad found what was left of the cottage and rebuilt it on the beach?
No, he didn't. Well, he said he wouldn't mess with it. He sold a lot.
Were you disappointed about that?
Yes, I was, but that's the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was grown. My sister was grown and lived in Washington, and I was grown and getting ready to get married. So he figured he wouldn't bother with it anymore. But of course, my brother was still small. He was about 11, something like that, and 12. But he sold the land, and he was able to sell the lumber because the house was actually intact, just picked up where it was just one big long room, and built very well. I think Robert Jones built it, and we were able to salvage a lot of the furniture out of it. I remember even giving Lillian Collins a couple of the chairs after she lost her house up it burned where she lived up on the River Road. And of course, when we got an apartment in Wilmington, we didn't have a refrigerator, and we came down here and painted that old refrigerator they had washed around in the ocean, and took it out there and used it for a year. And then when we moved back down here, we sold it to Miss Grace Ford for $25. They don't make refrigerators like
No,
that.
I guess not. Did you go to the beach a lot on the island? Did you have a cottage like this, or you just went swimming?
We just went, she took me most of the time, or my dad would take me when he'd get off work. He would come and get Catherine, Marie sometimes, and go take us.
My favorite story about you and Catherine is when your dad would take you, the two of you, down in the county with him when he was going on lawyer business. I mean, he'd take those children, he loved them dearly, and he would take them everywhere he went. He was the finest kind. They were, but he was great about that.
He would tell me that we had to go to them. Today people come to the lawyer's office, but back then a lot of the clients were so poor, some didn't have even the means to get here. So he would go there, and if it was a witness in a case, we would go to their house, and I would sit in the car. So it was nice to have Catherine. And we would sit in the car, and oftentimes they would come out of the house and sit in the car with him, and they would discuss whatever it was, and I did that too. And because and some people felt intimidated to have to come to the lawyer's office, in town, because it meant they got in some kind of trouble, and the office was right beside the courthouse, and so we would spend a good portion of the weekend going.
So his office was right next to the courthouse.
Right.
So where would that be now?
It's an art gallery now.
No, it's
Well, he had 4 offices. here in town. So
You mean you moved from one to
Yeah,
another?
one to another.
Mhm.
The first one was where the Moore Street Market is.
Mhm.
That was the first one. And then he moved, it's a little brick building that's right behind the
Right behind the flea market, right behind, that's where I remember being.
And then when he became a district judge, and that was, I think they stayed there for several, well, actually he did, he came back to that office after when he went back to practicing law, and then he moved to the one where, it's, Mike Eisenberg still has it, her name's Laura Thompson, their office right there, next to
I don't know.
the antique store there. It's like right across the street from the Moore Street Orchard Bar.
Oh, yes,
It's
okay.
right there.
Okay.
So that was the last office.
Oh, yeah, upstairs.
Mhm.
And where, Elva Chess.
Yeah,
Well,
Elva,
Elva and, can't think of his name right
Did you ever go into the old courthouse?
All the time. All the time. I can remember that very well. I can remember sneaking into the Negro bathroom because I didn't know what that was weird to me. And I was often left to sit, which you would never leave your children to sit in a public building. Nowadays. So there used to be like a pew in that hallway. And I would sit there sometimes waiting for him to get out of court or whatever.
But you're talking the first floor?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because where else was it? The
Yeah.
courtroom was upstairs. And I remember sitting there just getting up enough courage.
now. Well, you know, I hope when they restored that building, that they put a drop ceiling in the hall. It was very high. And I hope they take that drop ceiling out and make it look like it used to, because it was a huge hallway.
People used to vote in there. That's where you went to vote,
Yeah.
and you voted
Sure.
in the hallway. They had little booths with a little curtain, remember? Because I used to go vote with my parents, because my dad was always running for something. And it was a big deal to go vote. And I remember I would be so little that I could see up underneath the bottom of that curtain, because it would only came in a little bit high.
When I was in high school, there was a telephone booth in that hall, and it was never locked. So you could go in there after dark and make a telephone call. And I never did, but I know people that did. And I remember one time, I wish I could remember whose car it was. Joby and some of his friends picked up their car and sat it in the hallway in the
How did
courtroom.
you get it in there?
Well, the doors were so wide, it was a little car, they just sat in there, and man came, looked out for his car, and the next day was sitting in the hall, and they put in the city hall. And the courthouse, not city hall, it turned out to be city hall. But, yeah, there's always something going on in there.
And I remember my grandfather was the registrar of deeds for a while. And then when I clerked for my dad in college, and I remember having to go in the register of deeds office with those humongous books. And when you would have to search a title, you would have to go in those big books and turn the page.
Yeah,
And,
I did that when I got out of high school. I worked for Kirby Sullivan.
yes.
And he would send me down there to research things for me.
Actually,
That ball,
book.
yeah.
It's huge.
Mama loved those books. She'd go out to the courthouse and spend hours with a pencil in her mouth writing down, because she loved to research genealogy. And she spent all of her hours when she could in a courthouse vault, and she didn't go down to Conway and go through their records. But it was, and they also, not many years ago, had the courtroom itself upstairs. They had that refurbished. And whoever, this is an oldest building in town. And of course, no one asked me. And they refurbished that thing and put chandeliers in there that looked like they may have been in a ballroom in England or something, in a country courthouse. I hope if they refurbish it, they research what type looking lights should have been put in, and redo it with the proper chandelier type lights instead of,
Well, I don't know, I think you better talk to the folks then, because they have other ideas for its use.
well, they could still have
They
lights
still
that
need to
are,
keep that courtroom, because that was,
yeah.
oh, it was.
that was the center of the county. That was where
Yes.
everything was going on in the world when I was little. And it's people coming and going out of that courthouse. It's the register deeds office and the clerk of court. And, you know, of course, court was going on all the time.
There used to be, I can remember my grandmother saying, I don't remember because he died right before I was born, but my great-grandfather, whose house I live in, dressed all up every morning and walked down to the courthouse, and that's how the men, they'd just go sit in court and see what was going on. That was their entertainment for the day.
Yeah, people used to tell me that
Yeah.
I'll be down even in the lower end of the county, and people say, yeah, we used to come to court to see your daddy. Because, you know, he was,
Yeah, it was entertaining.
it was entertaining.
I never did go in.
Packed it, yeah, they packed the courtroom.
So now, Libby, if you clerk for your dad, are you an attorney now?
No, I had started law school then, but I didn't finish. And,
Okay.
but anyway, so I did that for several summers. I had to do that and clean the toilets in the office and all that. That was good.
I'll tell you where his office was at one time, because I remember Elder Jess was working for him, and it was where the Thai peppers.
Oh, yeah, we did. It was in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it was when I worked for him.
Yeah.
It was in the post
Was
office.
that a single floor or two floors?
It was where, yes,
It's
one side that used to be security, savings and loan, and the other side was a post office. And
Yeah.
when they moved out, guess what, to build this
Yeah.
one here, they used that for office. That was when he first went back into practice.
Yeah.
When I was,
When Elba came.
yeah, he hired Elva.
But, because I remember Marie was going off to college, and I knew I had to get a job if she was going to go off to college. And I had never worked out before. I'd been a stay-at-home mother, as they call it now. And I was I hadn't typed in years and years and years. And Captain said, Mama can go down there and help you out. I went, well, Mama looked at that typewriter, and I hadn't typed in so many years. I was as scared as if I'd been a first grader going to first. So I found another job.
Doing what?
Well, I worked mostly the bank. I worked at the bank. I started out as a teller when I was 41. So, and I went to work at the bank the day that Eric was 12 years old, and that's the first time I had worked out since I worked for some lawyer down there when I got out of high school. I could type fairly good then, but it had been so long since I had typed that I was really rusty. I didn't have a typewriter at home.
Well, ladies, again, I thank you so much for this. This is just wonderful.
Well,
I'm so excited to
Very nice.
see
Well, I don't know
it.
that there's anything on this thing that I'm gonna edit, that I will let you.
I don't think there's anything you have to worry about, either one of you. And I do hope then when Catherine is feeling better, you would be willing to come and talk to us about being on Ms. Harper's campaign. Wonderful.
They had some experiences.